Today's episode is sponsored by Datadog, the cloud scale monitoring service that provides comprehensive visibility into public cloud, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud environments with over 250 integrations. Datadog unifies your metrics, logs, and distributed request traces into one platform, so you can investigate and troubleshoot issues across every layer of your stack. Use Datadog's rich, customizable dashboards and algorithmic alerts to monitor cloud migrations in real time. To start a free trial today and Datadog sending you a free t-shirt, visit datadoghq.com/cloudcast to get started. That's datadoghq.com/cloudcast.
Cloudcast Media presents from the massive studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. This is the Cloudcast with Aaron Delp and Brian Gracely, bringing you the best of cloud computing from around the world.
Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to the Cloudcast. We are coming to you live from the massive Cloudcast studios here in Raleigh, North Carolina. Aaron, we are getting very close to not only the end of the year, but the holidays. How you been, man?
Not too bad, not too bad. It is one of those, everyone's kind of making, for us in the industry, there's those final trips of the year, and then everyone's kind of shutting it down, and that's definitely what's going on here. It's a noticeable slowdown in travel, and also a noticeable slowdown in the news, I think, this week as well. I mean, we've got a couple articles, but I'd say it's a little bit slower.
Yeah, obviously, all the big shows are sort of done for the year. I don't think anybody's going to make any big announcements, right? We could always have a scandal or something, but I don't think any huge announcements are coming. But there was a couple of things. I'll throw the first two out there, and I think I hate to lump them together, but they sort of fall into this same kind of trend we're seeing. So the first one is Salesforce is opening up their platform, or sort of expanding their platform, to now sort of include some serverless type capabilities. As well, Atlassian is also launching some new serverless capabilities around their cloud platform. So this is, kind of this trend that we've seen with a number of the things that developers interact with that you don't necessarily think of as a cloud, right? They're not Amazon, Google, or Azure. But they're essentially realizing that, the things that people do with functions, with sort of, small types of interactions, streaming, event-based things. We saw this with GitHub, has this as well. So sort of a trend that we're seeing where the places where developers are doing work, they're now realizing like, hey, we should incorporate some of those capabilities. So I guess if nothing else, this definitely validates that sort of serverless and functions as a service has become very much a mainstream thing.
Yeah. And so I'm going to throw in a joke there of, we've got prediction show coming up, I'm assuming here before too much longer. So I'm going to say 2020 is the year of serverless, but no, just there's that. But then I was also wondering too, to kind of flip a question back at you real quick, your thoughts on this, going back to your analyst days. What's interesting to me is, we're not calling anything PaaS anymore.
Right.
That's definitely kind of it's almost PaaS is passe, if you will, now. But you've got a lot of serverless stuff coming up, but at the same time, it's developer tools. It's at the function level. Like, what is your quick thoughts, like in a minute or two, on PaaS versus serverless these days, and for the listeners?
Yeah, I think that in a nutshell, I think you're right. The idea that something is called a PaaS is sort of we've moved past that. But I think the idea, and I've mentioned this to companies I talk to all the time, like the original goal that PaaS had, which was we would like to make our developers more productive. We would like to make them not have to care about the underlying plumbing. That's in essence what serverless has sort of evolved to. Granted, it's for a sort of a superset or a subset of certain types of applications, but I think the ultimate goal is still there. And then what we call it is sort of become irrelevant, right? Like you don't really see Gartner or Forrester or even any of the analyst firms, kind of putting out PaaS Magic Quadrants or serverless Magic Quadrants. It's just become, hey, are you achieving the goal of making developers more productive? So that's the way I tend to think about it. I don't worry about the terminology anymore.
And quick follow on, will PaaS go down as in history as just something that was just too prescriptive?
Yeah, I think that was the sort of downfall of the original sort of PaaS 1.0, if you will, was maybe a little too opinionated, a little too maybe biased on one language or another. And we're now sort of seeing the second reincarnation of it, if you will. So, it was like everything else we've seen in technology. It was a stepping stone to something much broader once we understood how people actually used it.
Yeah. So there you go. Got cloud news and commentary all in one.
That's right. That's right. The other one that was on the list, and it's going to be a short list this week, Google Cloud. Google signed a big healthcare deal that has some people sort of up in arms about. We're seeing Google get more involved with verticals, which is interesting, right? Sort of what the cloud can do. It always used to be sort of horizontal technology. We're seeing more of that. But the idea that healthcare providers are going to provide data to Google, directly, I think concerns some people in terms of, how do we know that this is going to happen? Everybody promises that it will remain, by itself. And then, at some point, who knows? There always tends to be a breach at some point. So this is very interesting, especially considering all the work that goes on around HIPAA and other things to make sure that this data doesn't get in the wrong hands or leaked or whatever.
Yeah, and at its most basic level, when you go into the doctor's office here in the States, you sign a whole bunch of forms, and of those forms, it's a little bit of what they're going to do with your data and who owns your data, and who do you grant access to your data. When I filled out my forms, it had, here's the people that you put down that can access your data. I don't remember putting Google down.
Right. Exactly.
When I signed my paperwork. So it'll be interesting to see. This has been, kind of swirling around for a while of Google trying to do this, especially in healthcare. There's been multiple stories and multiple angles, and I think this is just the latest one.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it does sort of bump up against the idea that the cloud providers can help some of these industries that are sort of tech deficient, if you will, right? They've got big problems to solve. There are big data problems, but they do sort of start to cross over into some gray areas. Well, the last thing that I have on our Cloud News of the Week, and this is, I guess, news for anybody who's listened to the show for a long time. If you are a new listener to the show, this is going to sound like a really weird, obscure thing, but we've reached that time of year where, for anybody who knows, this is the Donut Run time of the year. It's our request for our community to sort of help us give back to our more local community. But Aaron, give folks the Cliff Notes version. What is the Donut Run, and why do we do it?
Yeah, so the name of the race is the Krispy Kreme Challenge. And so what you do is you start at NC State University, you run 2.5 miles to the local Krispy Kreme, you eat a dozen donuts, and you run 2.5 miles back. And if you manage to keep the donuts down and do it in under an hour, you quote unquote win.
That's right. So why would we do something as stupid? Why would anybody do something as stupid as that?
Because we have really over the years we've developed a team, and then we don't necessarily ask for money on this show. The one thing we do ask out of the listeners every year is help us in this cause. We have a team, and we do take donations. The donations go to the North Carolina Children's Hospital, which is the partner for Krispy Kreme for the run. It is funded by, organized by NC State University students. And so really, really good cause, really crazy run, gets a lot of attention every year. About 8,000 students and participants here in the Raleigh area, really donating a lot of money for North Carolina Children's Hospital. And it's fantastic. We've been very privileged to be a part of it. Was it 30,000 over the last 7 years, maybe?
Yeah, between 30 and 35,000. We've been very lucky. We've been extremely fortunate. Our audience, our community has made donations, has helped us be the largest team giver, I think, for the last 5 or 6 years in a row. So, we get the chance to go out, represent the Cloudcast community. We show up with a gigantic check, which is always fun. And look, at the end of the day, we get a chance to help some kids and their families who are going through some pretty rough times. It's cancers, it's really difficult illnesses and things that put parents and families in the hospital for long periods of time. So, if you're able to do it, we always appreciate it. There will be a link at the top of the show. We'll put it in the show notes at the top of thecloudcast.net. You can make a donation. They all are tax deductible, at least if you're in the United States. So if you're looking for a tax deduction this calendar year, you can do it. And the race is in early February. So we always extend a thing out to our listeners. If you want to come out and do something really dumb with us, you're welcome to come run with us for the 5-mile run. It is a lot of fun. It's kind of Mardi Gras-like, but ultimately it's for a really, really good cause. So we will put that in the show notes. You will occasionally hear about us asking for your generosity for the next couple of months, and we will thank you so much in advance. Our community has been amazing in the past, and maybe they will help us out again this year. So With that, Aaron, that's going to wrap up Cloud News of the Week. It's going to wrap up this. The next couple of shows are going to sort of be wrap up not only end of the year shows, but end of the decade shows. So we're going to kind of do some cool stuff.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Right. So we're going to do a couple of cool end of year, end of decade shows for the rest of the year, give you some stuff to listen to, and especially if you're with family or want to get away from family for 30 minutes or so. So with that, we're going to wrap it up, and we will look forward to kind of a really fun interview, a topic that we've never touched before, but really brings together two things that we've talked about a lot. So I think you're going to enjoy it. Today's show is sponsored by MongoDB. As a programmer, you think in objects. With MongoDB, so does your database. MongoDB is the most popular document database built for modern application developers and the cloud era. Millions of developers use MongoDB today to power the world's most innovative products and services, from cryptocurrency to online gaming, IoT, and much more. Try MongoDB today with Atlas, the global cloud database service that runs on AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. Configure, deploy, and connect to your database in just a few minutes. Check it out today at mongodb.com/atlas. That's mongodb.com/atlas. And we're back. Aaron, one of the things that we talk about a lot is kind of the need to go faster, the need to go faster, the need to build software faster. And the dirty little secret, and you know this very well, sort of being in the storage world, is people don't like to talk about stateful stuff. They like to talk about fast, stateless stuff. And so today we are going to sort of dive into the stateful side of things and how we try and kind of balance out both the application side of stuff and the data side of stuff. So Aaron, I think this is going to be right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you mentioned that. If this was video, everyone would see me, kind of trying to suppress laughter as you kind of did that introduction, because to your point, exactly. It seems like all these emerging technologies and architectures, everyone starts with, oh, it's going to be awesome. You have to do this, you have to do that. And then it's like, okay, great. Where do you store everything?
Right.
And you just kind of there, and everyone's eyes kind of glaze over a little bit like, oh, don't worry about it. And it's like, well, no, that's kind of the whole point.
Exactly. Exactly.
So let's introduce Robert.
Yeah, absolutely. So very excited to have Robert Reeves, who is co-founder and CTO of DataCal down in Austin, Texas. Robert, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah. So before we dive into any of this database and DevOps stuff, give us a little bit of your background, some of the things that you've worked on in the past, and what sort of brought you to be interested in this space.
Well, before the co-founders and I started Datacal, I had been a release manager. We used to call it software configuration management. And then we had terms like release manager, build master, had that title for a little while. But it was the idea of like, okay, how do we take code from development, move it to test, and then out to production? And I am a very lazy person, also impatient. A lot of hubris, which is Larry Wall's 3 virtues of a good software engineer. And I always wanted to, every day when I came into the office, my focus was to automate myself out of a job. Now, I never did. There was always something else. But I always really wanted to focus on, the fun stuff, and not the toil, the drudgery. I wanted to, like Larry Ellison calls it, human mischief. Wanted to get away from that, and so we started a company called Furnace, and that was a installer for Java application servers, and we had sold it to BMC. And but while I was at Furnace, the customers were saying, hey, man, this is great. What do you do about the database? And of course, CTO and co-founder of a startup, my answer was, well, it's on the roadmap. Absolutely. we're doing it next quarter. But what would you like it to do? And it got us thinking that, hey, wait a minute, there's all this new technology out there that is allowing us to develop and deploy applications faster. What are we doing about the database? What are we doing about those folks? Because our belief is that a herd is only as fast as its slowest member. And even if dev, test, whoever is going faster, if you still have to wait on manual database schema change, you're not that fast. You're just, some people are fast, but not everybody. And that's what we have to do with DevOps. We have to improve every part of the SLDC, or else we're just not going to get the outcomes we want.
So this is fascinating to me because you bring up a lot of points we've talked about many times on this show, but it's usually it's like one or the other. It's either we talk about DevOps or we talk about databases. And so I think this is probably the first show we've ever done, which is kind of surprising, for us, Brian, that we're combining these together in this way. And so we talk a lot about DevOps, we talk a lot about databases, but why do most folks not necessarily until now have thought of them together? It's not as if these cloud native applications are stateless, as we kind of mentioned in the intro.
Well, for a long time, we wanted the world's fastest computer, the human brain, to be in charge of updating that database schema. Because if something went wrong, it really went wrong. There's bad things happen, and my friends over at GitLab, they, what was that, last year? There's a production database issue that took 3 days to be corrected. It was because of manual change. But in the past, we've always wanted a human to review all those schema changes. And that was a good thing because, we were only releasing once a quarter and we could do that. Well, now we're using microservices. We are using the cloud. It's a lot easier. The restrictor plate for those NASCAR fans out there is no longer there. And Dev is moving really fast. And what that's doing is it's killing the DBAs. For so long, we had this wall you could argue for the right reasons, but it's a moot point now. Now we are crushing our DBAs. And we have to figure out a way to align that database schema change with the application code changes. If we don't do that, then what's the point in those new cloud native architectures of adopting DevOps? What's the point of making just one side of the house fast if it doesn't result in faster delivery to production?
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I feel like we're having a little bit of an episode of DevOps Database Anonymous or something, right? We're kind of getting all the demons out up front, and so for people that maybe aren't familiar with kind of why these are problems, right? Because sometimes you might just go, well, it's all software. Why can't it sort of all go fast? What are some of the big challenges that DBAs have? Partially, on the technical side, but also just on the, hey, a bad day for a DBA is a really bad day, more so than maybe other groups.
Well, look, these are different techs. I mean, I can deploy an application and I can blow away the old version and just delete it. Stateless. Even when going back to, J2EE app, an EAR file, no problem. And if there's a problem with that deployment, I can always roll back. We can't do that with databases. So the first thing is that database, a schema to get from yesterday's release to today's release, it must evolve. We must, we can't just copy over the dev or test version of the database because we're going to lose the data. There is structure and data in one place. So we have to evolve that structure to maintain the data. So it's not an issue of just zapping it and putting the new version on it. So that's one issue. The other is that for too long, we have had two different paths to production with application change and database change. So application, that's automated now, or we're moving toward that. And those technologies are being adopted faster and faster. Over on the database side, it's been boy, it's been a while since we've had real innovation, especially in relational database land. I mean, Oracle's release of Autonomous Database, that's kind of cool. No indexes, yay. We'll use machine learning there. That's pretty neat. But we are still updating structure, that schema and that stored logic the same way we did in 1979 when first release of Oracle came out running on VAX. Ran .SQL files. We have syntax highlighting now. That's cool, but it's still the same. And so it is. But we've had this wall between dev and data for so long. It was the sentinels of data, our DBAs, arms crossed, stay away. I've got this, and that was for the right reason. But now that we've changed how we develop and deliver our software, there isn't a really good reason why we shouldn't take those learnings of DevOps and apply them to the database. It's just like us applying Agile and DevOps to the mainframe. There's no real structural reason. I mean, there is some differences, but the same algorithm that we use for DevOps, we can also apply that to the database. Why we haven't done it? It's just because we have just this, humans. We don't like to change. And I think Conway's Law is really the reason why we haven't done it. That's how we've always done it. We'll keep doing it, but we have to make a change today. We can't sustain this.
Robert, quick side question around those topics. When you're talking about, test dev and some of these things, how does anonymization of production data, for privacy issues factor into some of this today?
Well, we partnered with a company that helps solve that problem. All right, and I do think that the ability to provide production-like data to our dev and test teams is really important, because if we are moving to a world where you build it, you run it, we need to give those developers, those product owners, the ability to develop against production-like data. But at the same time, we can't be just letting PII just litter about on unsecure cloud databases. It's not a good thing. We've seen way too many data leaks that have, unsecured, Elasticsearch or Mongo databases on the internet with patient data. We have to, if we're going to provide our dev and test team production-like data, it does have to be masked. It does have to be anonymized so that, as my friends at Delphix say, that when you do break in and get that data, all you're stealing is an empty purse. There's nothing of value there. So I do think that we need to solve two problems here for our developer and test teams. One is we do need to provide production-like data that has PII either masked or anonymized or however you want to phrase it. But we also need to give them the ability to update that structure in dev, test, and production the same way they're deploying the app. That same automation tool that they're using to deploy, they need to also update the schema. So I think when I look at anonymizing data, masking it, I think of that as a right to left problem. Instead of refreshing dev environments with production data, how about we refresh it with mass data? And then the problem that we solve at Datical is the left to right problem. Okay, now that I've developed the application and I understand how it's going to affect the data, I need to take that structure change and move it from dev to test to production. So it's both things. You got to solve both.
Interesting. So one of the things, as CTO, you're always going to have a sort of a technology that you're heavily involved with or heavily interested. You work around a project, open source project called Liquidbase, kind of tool for database schema change management. Tell us about Liquidbase. Kind of give us its founding, kind of where it got started, and then kind of how it's evolved.
Well, when we started Datical, my co-founders and I, we looked at what was out there that solved the database schema change problem, and we found Liquibase. And it was really good. So that had started in 2006 by Nathan Voxland. And Nathan was a Java developer. He still is. And but he was at the time too. And to paraphrase a Mitch Hedberg line, he had Ruby on Rails envy. So Ruby on Rails, you could change an object, add an attribute to an object, and it would automatically add a column to a table. And he was like, ooh, I like that, but I don't want to write in Ruby. I need to write in Java. So he built Liquibase to solve that problem. And when we looked at the project, we said, man, this is great, but there are other things that we should probably add to this for larger customers. And that's what we did with Datical. We added the ability to, we have a rules engine to be able to enforce standards and kind of make sure you don't do chuckle-headed stuff like add a foreign key without having indexes on those columns in the foreign key. Or, you can enforce naming conventions. All tables start with T underscore. So we reached out to Nathan and we're like, Nathan, how'd you like to work on your baby full time? And Nathan's response was, yeah, I like the idea, but I'm not leaving Fargo. And so Datical's based in Austin. And we were like, man, you just stay there. It's cool. It's cool. So he works from home and we provide about 95% of the commits to Liquibase. It's open source and will always remain open source, BSD style, Apache 2.0 license. But we are the Liquibase company. That's us. And so we have added a lot of features and functionality like being able to track status across the enterprise, those sorts of things. And so for some customers, Liquibase is just good enough, and that's great. Use it. But for large enterprises, they need a little bit more, and that's what Datical does. But we could not be where we are today without open source. And there's a large amount of people that can say that, and we like to be included in that group.
Now, follow-on question to that, is Liquibase mostly relational databases, or can it be used for other types as well?
Well, today it is relational, but we are working, the Liquibase community has provided the initial pull requests for Mongo support. So that's the first NoSQL database that we're going to be supporting. And it's pretty cool. The problem between, you think of NoSQL, well, that doesn't have structure. Why do I need to worry about schema? But it does have structure. Each document has its own structure, And so if you're looking at all these NoSQL databases, it's JSON document stores. Let's say the first release of the application, you thought that every user was going to have one address, one physical mailing address. And then you put out the software and you're like, yeah, that's not the case. So you might have at least a second address, maybe for billing address and shipping address. But what happens if somebody wants to ship to another address? And so instead of having a one-to-one relationship between street address and a user, you need to have a one-to-many. So there's two ways to approach that. One, you can make sure your software is backwards compatible, that if it sees an older JSON doc, it is on the fly going to update it. Another approach, which we think is superior, is before we release that new version of the software, let's go through all those old JSON docs and update them and maybe alert on things that might not be updatable. And so that's the approach we're taking with NoSQL. We're looking at this and saying, okay, there isn't structure, the concept of adding a column is no longer there. But still, we need to change, that structure in each individual document. So that's the approach we're taking. We're pretty excited about it because this is our first example of somebody providing a net new platform that is very different from relational. And we're setting up this concept of a lab. We're going to incubate this extension to Liquibase, get it fully baked, and then bring that into the project, into core, and then see about applying those same learnings to other NoSQL platforms like Dynamo or Couchbase or other things.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, it's it is good to see that happening. It's always good to see community being interested in it. So as I'm sort of learning about this as we're talking about it, it kind of dawns on me, and I'm curious, sort of what your take is. So we have this lack of ability to kind of automate databases, or at least kind of keep up with that. Do you find that impacts kind of the application side of things, the continuous integration side of things, or continuous deployment side of things, or does it impact sort of just security in general because you can't patch at the same velocity, or is it sort of impactful to both of those things, right? Sort of security and app deployments.
So when you say patching, are we talking about patching the database, or are we talking about patching our application?
Well, I think it's probably a little bit of both, right? Because sometimes you've got to patch something for the database, but also sometimes you have to make a patch to get to some level of compatibility or a version compatibility.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I really break down DBAs into two buckets. So right now we have application DBAs, and they really focus on the structure, the schema, the stored logic, stored procedures, triggers, views, that kind of stuff that is necessary for the application to run. And then we have system DBAs, and they focus on maybe tuning, provisioning, patching the database runtime. And so I don't think that our system DBAs need to be involved in the application side of the house. I think that they are gifted specialists that really are focused on making sure that Oracle or MySQL, Postgres, whatever, is going to run in its platonic form, its idealized form. And they're really focused on, okay, how do I get more IOPS here? Okay, that's cool. Now, there's certainly implications for the application. If you, over on the developer side of the house, did this query this way, things would be better. And I think they definitely should weigh in on that. But I really want the concept of application DBA to go away. I really want developers to step up to the plate and to own the schema change. I think that they need to. For too long, management, development leadership has allowed them to just say, oh, that's the database. That's somebody else's problem. And boy, I just think that's lazy, bad lazy, not good lazy like I am. But it's the bad kind of lazy. And I think they need to own the entire application, uppercase A. So I do think there's implications for performance for, I think there's the place for those system DBAs to weigh in and to help them. But I want to see those application DBAs learn Python and become SREs. That's what I want to see happen. And we've certainly seen that at our customers. When DBAs are no longer worried about schema change, they start moving over into SRE land, site reliability engineer, and they start, well, one, they get a raise, which is really nice. But two, they take all that DBA knowledge that they've got trapped between their ears, and they start being little Johnny Appleseeds of good database procedures and policies and start, kind of sprinkling that around into application land. And that's a very good thing. We just have this wall and it just doesn't make sense anymore. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And kind of, I'll ask this, and maybe it's just a reframing of, and your answer is exactly the answer you just gave, but just to kind of the concept that in my head where I'm going with this is, in enterprise tech in particular, you always had this idea of, pre-DevOps, the Department of No, right? No one wanted to make any changes because changes were risk, right? Mm-hmm. Risk to the network going down, risk to the storage going down, risk to the database going down. And there's always this hesitancy and this go slow mentality because, what happens if it fails, right? And so how do you suggest companies in general getting more comfortable in making frequent changes to databases? Is it as simple as adopting the SRE and DevOps mentality? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the first thing that needs to happen for those enterprises that say we must go slow to go fast is that they need to read Dr. Nicole Forsgren's latest State of DevOps report. And she has done a huge amount of research. And the most recent one, the one from this year, 2019, talks about that heavyweight change approval process. This idea that, no, we need a lot of people to look at this to make sure that we're not going to break anything. That, in fact, it leads to more things breaking. It's slower to fix them. She has research, tens of thousands of survey respondents, and she has looked at the data. Her PhD is in computer science, so she knows about this far more than I do or any of us do. And she has proven that this idea that we must go slow to go fast is just wrong. That by eliminating a heavyweight change approval process actually makes us more safe. And I go back to that line about, yes, ships are safer at port, but that's not what ships are made for. And if you look at what the Navy does, the U.S. Navy, they're always running drills. They always run drills over and over and over again. So when they have to really do that thing, they're prepared for it. They have built up muscle memory. And when you're releasing once a month and you have to go back to a run book or these sorts of things, that's the wrong way. When you have to rely on humans to follow a process, I think we need to automate this and move faster and use DevOps to identify areas where we are going slow or we have gone wrong and take that as an opportunity to improve. The Samuel Beckett line, right? Ever fail, fail again, fail better, learn from it, and just don't do it again the same way. Go find another way to screw up.
No, that's excellent stuff. I know, Dr. Forsgren has been on a couple of other podcasts here recently, folks. I know she did a really good 2-part series over on Corey Quinn's Screaming the Cloud. Go take a look at that. Obviously, she writes a number of excellent books, and she's been doing some stuff with Jez and Gene Kim and all those folks. So yeah, definitely excellent resources to go dig into if you haven't already. Robert, I feel like we have exerted you for quite a bit now. We want to let you get back to sort of laziness, and especially on a Friday. Thank you so much for thank you so much for being on. If anybody wants to sort of follow up with you, pick your brain on some of these things. What are good ways to maybe get in touch, or some stuff you're doing at Datacall they could dig into?
Well, just check out, Datacall.com. Certainly go check out Liquibase, liquibase.org. You can just put it in Google and misspell it, and it'll correct it for you. Or you can, go ahead and hit us up on Twitter at Datacall, at Liquibase, at Robert Reeves, especially if you need comic book recommendations or the perfect Christmas cocktail. I'm your guy.
There you go. There you go. Fantastic stuff. Robert, thank you so much for spending some time with us. Folks, like we mentioned, this is a topic we haven't really dug into, but we sort of have dug into it from different times. So it's good to connect the dots between, moving applications faster, the databases underneath them, and then how to ultimately make them go faster. So with that, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you to everybody for listening, for telling a friend, for helping us grow the show. And with that, we will talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to The Cloudcast. Please visit thecloudcast.net to find more shows, show notes, videos, and everything social media.